Hi guys! Today I want to talk about indecisiveness, or more specifically, how to stop being indecisive and start believing in your own choices. I will, as I usually do, deconstruct this feeling, and together we will look at its root causes. Then we will go through some strategies, some practical tips on how to work with this feeling, and finally I will share my personal experience with indecisiveness so that you won't have to feel as alone in it. So let's get started. So in the notes I made for myself, I wrote that the feeling of indecisiveness strikes us when we are asked to challenge the status quo in our own life. When we are presented with choices like whether you want to stay in your hometown or move to a big city, whether you want to stay in this particular job that you have right now, or whether you want to get a new job or move to self-employment or start your own company, whether you want to stay in this relationship or break up and move on. But as I wrote that, I also realized that we might feel just as indecisive about smaller things, like whether you want to read a book or watch a movie, whether you want to listen to this genre of music while working out or that genre of music while working out. So this feeling is not reserved to one type of decisions or one area of your life. In this video, we will be focusing more on life-altering choices, but of course, once you build up this confidence, its influence, this effect will trickle down to other areas of your life. From my personal observations, indecisiveness comes from mainly two things, or these two things combined. It is either the lack of radical honesty with ourselves about what we truly want from life, or it is the inability to work with our feelings of regret. So let's start with the first one, the lack of radical honesty. When we are asked to choose between two or more options, especially when it comes to these life-altering decisions, we usually know where our inclinations are, but for one reason or another, we hide the answer from ourselves. Do you want to live in the countryside and be able to afford a higher quality of life and have immediate access to nature national parks? Or do you want to live in a big, busy city and be able to see your friends often, go to events, visit museums, and stuff of that nature? Usually, when we're presented with a question like that, we instantly know the answer, right? I'd rather sacrifice some of my income, but see my friends more often and visit museums and attend all these fun events. Or even though I love this person and we've had a lot of fun memories together, I can see that this relationship hit a wall and it's time for us to part our ways. And the reason for why we're usually not 100% honest with ourselves about our true desires is because we are afraid that we might be making a mistake. And we're gonna cover the aspect of regret, wrong choices, and all of that in a moment. But for now, I just want you to focus on simply admitting to yourself what you really want. In fact, you should develop a practice out of it. Every time you're presented with a question like that, you should just take a moment, sit with this choice, and admit to yourself what you really, truly desire. And it might be hard, especially if it's challenging this status quo we just talked about, but for now, try to take the responsibility of making the choice out of the equation and simply focus on admitting your feelings. And why I want you to develop this practice is because sometimes you might realize that what you truly want is not even within this question. You might realize that, hey, I'm actually quite comfortable in the countryside. I have a very comfortable life here, but I should probably try and visit my friends in the city more often. Or I've been toying around with the idea of self-employment, but now I realize that a 9-to-5 job actually works better for me. It gives me the structure, it gives me the freedom. I really like that I don't have to do taxes, I don't have to pay the salary and pension, and it's somebody else's responsibility. And I can still explore my passions and my creativity in my free time. The human mind is a tricky place, and sometimes the reason why we're caught up on making a choice might not correspond with the choice itself. So be aware of that and act accordingly. And now, let's move on to working with our feelings of regret. What usually stops us from making the decision that we want to make is the inability to work with our own regret, or specifically the fear of regretting our potential choices. So if you do have some regrets at the moment and you're working on your feelings of indecisiveness, we can use those feelings as a groundwork to make you more okay and make you actually more confident with your own choices. If you don't have any regrets, which is very unlikely, but still, if that's the case, then the practice will be a little bit harder for you. So the exercise. Regret as a feeling really likes to isolate events in our life and look at them through this microscope lens, while all of our decisions are actually highly contextual. What that means in practice is that when you make a decision, there is usually a whole lot of corresponding events, experiences, and feelings that go into making the whole decision. There is a mindset that you have at the moment, there are your feelings, your physical, your emotional health, there are all the things you know and all the things that you don't know. In practice, it just means that there are no wrong decisions in life, really. I even created a whole video on this topic and I'm gonna link it somewhere here. What I want you to do is, next time the feelings of regret manifest themselves, I want you to remind yourself of the context of your decision. Let's say you broke up with your partner and then a month, 2 months later, you start feeling regretful. You start thinking, oh no, why did I do it? This person was so funny and we had such a great chemistry and we made a lot of great memories. So in that particular moment, I want you to go back in time and remind yourself of what you were thinking at that time. You're probably thinking that, yes, they're funny, but we have different values in life. Or yes, we have great chemistry, but we have so little in common that our relationship probably would have not lasted long anyway. Since regret disregards the context completely, the only way to deal with it is by reminding it of the context in which the decision was made. If I have to use an example from my own life, back in 2020, when I was doing a master's degree, I got accepted into a South Korean university, into the Ewha University, the women's university, for an exchange. I was over the moon, I was super excited, but then COVID happened and you couldn't really leave the country. My exchange was cancelled. Later on, the situation got a little bit better, so they renewed their offer, but I had to go to South Korea then in spring 2021. And spring 2021 was very hectic for me, or was supposed to be very hectic for me at that time, because I was finishing my master's degree, I had to look for a job, I had to look for a new apartment, and also I knew that the educational pressure in South Korea is very hard, that the studies will be nearly insane, and also I was running out of money, so I knew that if I go there, even though it would have been much cheaper than going just by yourself, I still would have probably had to look for a part-time job to be able to afford it. I knew that if I had accepted this offer, sure, I would have traveled to South Korea, the country that I really wanted to visit, but it would have come at such a cost. It would have come at a cost of a great burnout that would have potentially turned into a whole-blown depression, so I had to turn that offer down. I knew I was making the right decision, but it didn't stop the feelings of regret. And even up until recently, when I would think about traveling, when I would think about specifically traveling to Asia, I would remember this offer and I would feel the slight sting of regret, especially because in the European Union, people go on exchange all the time, and in my circle I'm literally the only one who hasn't done it. Naturally, I felt left out. I felt like I was missing on a huge chunk of life, and at some point I was even regretting my application for this exchange, because technically I could have easily arranged it if the exchange took place in Europe. So there were a lot of feelings, and every time these feelings would come up, I had to remind myself that the decision I made was the only possible one because of my values, my priorities, my resources, my general situation in life. And I think this feedback loop is really the only way to tackle regret. And another thing that might help with the feelings of regret is reminding yourself that even if the choice that you made for yourself didn't turn out to be what you wanted, it's not the end of the world. More often than not, if the option B didn't work for you, you can still come back to the option A. Perhaps you decided to move to a big city, but after a couple of years you realized that it's not really for you. Well, guess what? You can go back to your hometown or any other small town that suits your needs. You don't have to stick to a choice just because at the time you made it, it made sense. In my case, as many of you know, I recently switched to self-employment. I started my own business, and I know that if I don't see the results that I want in 3-5 years, I'm not gonna hit my head against the wall. I'm gonna go back to corporate. Sure, I might get a delay in my career, but that's the price I'm willing to pay for trying to get my dream life. Even when you break up with your partner, there's still a good chance that you might get together in the future and have an even better love story. A good example of it would be my own parents' story. When they just started dating, when they were in their early 20s, they broke up for a month or a few months. And after that, they got back together, and that's when they decided, right after when they got back together, that's when they decided that they actually want to get married, they want to have a family and all of that jazz. And since then, they've been happily married for nearly 30 years. And I know of other cases when a couple would break up and then both people would date someone else, and then after a year they would get back together and live happily ever after. It does happen. It's probably way more common than you might realize. So I hope these stories are of any comfort and they will help you remember that the choice you make is not the end of the world. You can always come back to the other option. And in a few parting words, I want to highlight the importance of experience. The first few times when you will have to make these choices, you will feel horrible. You will feel so uncomfortable. You will want to forget about the whole situation, go back home and hide in the corner. But this is exactly why you will have to push yourself in the beginning. It will feel uncomfortable, but these first few attempts will be the foundation of you getting confident in your own choices. After the first, I don't know, however many, 3, 5, 10 attempts, it might actually take you up to a few years, but eventually you will get confident. The more you make these decisions, the more in tune you will be with what you truly want, and also the easier it will get to make these decisions. So don't be afraid of feeling a bit meh in the beginning. Eventually, making these tough or small decisions will get easier. And with that, I'm gonna finish this video. I hope you liked it, I hope you found it useful, and as always, I wish you a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye bye!